Welcome to Take the Lead Radio with Dr. Diane Hamilton, where she interviews some of the most successful leaders, entrepreneurs, authors, speakers, and other individuals who will inspire you to take the lead in your career and personal life. And now, here is Dr. Diane Hamilton.
I am here with Daniel Burrus, who's considered one of the world's leading futurists on global trends and innovation. The New York Times has referred to him as one of the top 3 business gurus with the highest demand as a speaker. He is a strategic advisor to executives from Fortune 500 companies, helping them to accelerate innovation and results by developing game-changing strategies based on his proven methodologies for capitalizing on technology innovations and their future impact. His client list includes companies such as Microsoft, GE, American Express, Google, Procter & Gamble. I mean, the list goes on and on. He's the author of 7 books, including the New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller, Flash Foresight. And his latest book, The Anticipatory Organization, is something I want to talk about today. So I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure.
Well, this is going to be fun because I'm a professor, and I saw you started by teaching biology and physics. So
Yes, I did. I really, and I'm a teacher today with all of the writing and speaking I'm doing. I've just kind of redefined the classroom.
That's kind of how I look at what I do too. And it's really good to have a research background because it really helps you, especially with your book writing, I imagine, to see all of the information. But you like to look into the future, which I wish a lot of people had a better, way of doing that. Do you have a real sense of natural foresight? Did you always, would you ever have thought you were going to be a futurist when you were growing up, or is this something that surprises you?
No, I didn't really think about it, and but I always was interested in science and technology and its future impact. So the impact of innovations that are taking place in the present, I always go to what does that mean? Where does that go? How will we use it? And that was always of interest to me. But I think, once and this is decades and decades ago, realized, that we're all going to spend the rest of our life in the future. Maybe we ought to think about it. It started to unfold.
Well, were you a naturally curious person? We were talking before we got on the air. My book's about curiosity. I'm curious, how curious were you, and how important is it, do you think, to have curiosity?
I think it's extremely, childlike wonder and curiosity, as I think the key not only to a happy life, but to a successful life, because, and especially in business as an entrepreneur, because it gets you asking questions. Mm-hmm. Little kids ask, hundreds of times more questions a day than a PhD professor, right. Typically. And, and asking questions and wanting to learn. And that curiosity, asking yourself, well, why does that? And how does that work? And all of those things, that is the beginning of discovering things that were invisible to you.
Well, so you're talking about learning, and you have a video learning system, right? Didn't that lead to your latest book? I thought I said.
Yes, it did. I did something. We just talking about success and so on. Mm-hmm. I think that the 6 of the companies that I started, 5 were profitable in the first year. 4 were national leaders in the first year. One of them was in aviation. I had my own airplane design. I was a test pilot for my own plane, and ended up with 37 national locations. And I only share that as a setup to 2 things that really helped. Number one, I didn't try to compete, and I really have never tried to compete, because competition is difficult, and the more you look at your competition, the more you act like them, and the more your margins are low. Uh-huh. So what I did on purpose was look at what the competition was doing, and then on purpose not do that. So when I started my my learning system several years ago, what I did was, first of all, I looked at all of the latest learning systems by not only the big companies, but also the innovative startups, so that I knew what not to do. And then I looked at where technology was going so that I could create what the best practice would be instead of is. And I did get a Product of the Year award within the first several months. And,
Wow.
it's being used for leadership training in the military, and it's being used by large and small companies all over the world. So it became so successful that I thought, I just got to do a book around this because typically I think what an author does is put out a book and then develop systems around it. In
Right.
this case, I did another principle I teach, and that is opposites work better. So I did the opposite in this case, did the learning system, got it where it was working great, and then did a learning system as a complementary part of that.
Well, that's interesting. I've developed a lot of courses, and I was the MBA program chair at the Forbes School of Business, and I've worked for a bunch of different universities where we use different LMSs, and it's very challenging to create a course and have it be so successful. So that's awesome.
Well, and just a comment you made there, because a lot of people don't know what an LMS is, and that's a learning management system. And I, in my work, I looked at all the learning management systems, and they were really geared for the past versus where we're going in the future and all of the video and everything. So actually I ended up creating my own.
Oh, you did?
I had to. I couldn't find one that was good enough.
Matter
of fact, when I talked to people that had good ones, big companies, they would all say, yeah, but we're looking for another one because it's not that good. So I thought, that tells you something right there.
Well, that's interesting because I know a lot of the schools are using Canvas now, and I'm really want to look at your your software.
You got to check it out.
Yeah.
You got to take a look at it. And that's and as we just like with a website, whenever you do anything, what do? Well, you're already working on making it better because there's always a way to elevate everything, which excites me about the future. Everything, whether it's a bottle opener or it doesn't matter, can be made better. Well, how wonderful is that?
Yeah.
And that takes curiosity and wonder, by the way.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I've taught some Foresight classes, and boy, would I've loved to have had you as a come into class to be a guest lecturer, because we actually in one of them we started with the end, the world exploding, and then we went backwards, and it was kind of an interesting course. But we talked about trends, and I know you're big on talking about hard and soft trends, and can you just distinguish between those and why they're so important?
Yes, thank you. And, it's really this is based on 35 years of research. And, that's I've started a number of companies, but my core company, Burrus Research, has been around that long. So this isn't a new idea, and it's very powerful. It's really changed how companies and, from the Deloittes and the IBMs to even the Pentagon plan and innovate. So here's how it works. It's really, instead of I'm the only guy with good trends, forget everybody else's.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that at all. What I'm saying is there's no shortage of trends. The problem is which ones will happen and which ones won't.
Right.
And so this is a way to overlay. And there are two types of trends. I call them hard trends and soft trends. Hard trends are based on future facts. They will happen. This is not an if or a maybe. It's a future for sure. And it's amazing the power of that, because we live in an uncertain world, and it seems like other than death and taxes, everything is uncertain. Yet once you start seeing how much certainty there is, certainty gives you the confidence to make a bold move. And when you're uncertain, you don't make bold moves. Why do some kids not know which course to take, or should I even go to college? They're uncertain.
Right.
However, when you have certainty, you write big checks and say yes, and you move forward. So certainty has a very strong power. And then there are soft trends. And soft trends, unlike based on not future facts, but they are based on assumptions about the future. The problem is a lot of us think those assumptions are really a future fact, and we don't challenge them. And strategy based on an assumption about the future versus a future fact has different levels of risk, because let's face it, strategy based on certainty has low risk, strategy based on uncertainty has high. So I like both. And the reason I like both is hard trend, well, I can see it coming. I can see disruption before it disrupts. Turning disruption into a choice. Do I want to be the disruptor or the disrupted? Hey, now I can make a choice. And because it's going to happen, if I don't do it, someone else will. And then soft trends, the beauty of those are, if you don't like them, you can change them. And you know what? If you'd like, I can give you a real quick example so that we kind of make this concrete, because that's the teacher in me, and I know you understand this. And that is, I was speaking recently to a couple of thousand CEOs from the U.S. healthcare system. So we have CEOs from hospitals and drug companies, et cetera, et cetera. And before I gave my keynote speech, they, like all of us in the United States, have seen healthcare costs go up, 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 up for a long time. In other words, that trend line just keeps going up, up, up. And before I talked to them, they, we're all just dealing with it. Hey, that's the way it's going to be. In other words, that's the future fact, and we got to deal with it.
Right.
But once I started explaining this, I helped them to see that actually that's a soft trend. If you don't like it, you could change it. But if we think it's unstoppable, you don't try. And a quick example, we could use a technology called blockchain to bring increasing security, transparency, and therefore trust to a disconnected healthcare system and flush billions of dollars of waste out by creating actual competition. For example, I think you've probably read in magazine articles about how you might be paying $60 for an aspirin in a hospital.
Right.
Well, why are you doing that? That's because you don't know it costs $60. So once we know what things cost and we get transparency, by the way, that is going to happen. Blockchain is real and the system is very broken. All of a sudden, wow. Or one other quick one, how about using cloud and virtualization? These are not things that need to be invented, by the way. They already exist to completely transform, not change, but transform purchasing and logistics with hospitals. You could literally sweep billions of dollars, not millions, billions of dollars of waste annually out of that. In other words, hey, we could lower healthcare costs. So the key is, what do you want to change? If you want to change it, you can. If it's a soft trend, hey, you can change it. Just like increasing obesity. That's been going on in this country and others, by the way, for a long time. And the U.S. just did a big study to see how obese we'd be in 2025. By the way, didn't look pretty. And we just think, well, how are we going to pay for that mess? Instead, you know what? You can change that. And here's an example of a company that did Manpower. They gave all of their employees Fitbits and said, hey, we got weekly competitions with prizes. And over the couple of years, what happened? Well, they were getting off of cholesterol drugs. They were getting off of high blood pressure pills. They were losing weight. And, it's kind of like, well, the rest of the world can get fat, but we don't have to. We can affect that. That's actually a soft trend.
Well, that's fascinating. Having worked in pharmaceuticals for 15 years, I'm envisioning the blockchain thing. And I imagine you're saying it's similar to what we're seeing with cryptocurrency, where you're getting a transparency of how you're tracking things. Is that how this is going to work?
Yeah, well, the underlying technology for cryptocurrency is blockchain, and it can be used for unbelievable number of things, by the way, including voting, which we aren't going to get to yet, but we will get to eventually. A lot of people aren't going to like that because it'll make it too fair, but nonetheless, it's amazing what this underlying tool can do. And of course, I think we don't want to get too tied up on the tools and how they work,
right?
But if anyone listening would like, you could go to my website, Burrus, BURRUS.com, and I have a list of the 25 technologies that are shaping the future, and you can find blockchain and other things on there and learn more about them. And it doesn't cost you anything. You just go there.
Well, you have great content, and I was looking at a lot of the stuff that you have out there in terms, your TEDx talk about invisible solutions to impossible problems. I could spend all day asking you questions because you're a fascinating guy. You talk about working on the wrong problems. And before we get into your book, I'm still interested in some of the stuff you've talked about in the past. You say to solve impossible problems, you have to work on the right ones. How do we know we're working on the right problems?
Well, here's a hint for you. Whatever problem you got, that's not it. See, so now the reality is you'll define it. So if you drill down, and I teach how to drill down, you can find what the right problem is and solve it. I'll give you a real simple example. It just happened not long ago. Okay. I've got a niece named Hallie, and she called and said, Uncle Dan, I got my first job and I'm trying to save money, but I can't save money. And I'm really working hard at saving money, but it's not working. I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. And she knows it's possible, by the way, because her older sister, Audrey, can save money like crazy, but Hallie can't. So she's really trying hard to save money. And I said, well, that's because you're working on the wrong problem. You've got to work on how you spend money. If you work on how you spend money, you'll save money by default. See, she's working on the wrong one. So now that's a very simple example. But when I first started advising the DOD and the Joint Chiefs and the head of cybersecurity at the Pentagon, I asked, what's your biggest problem? And from a technical standpoint, and this is several years ago, and they said, I got to get all my legacy systems, and by the way, that means they're older systems. Right. I've got to get all my legacy systems into the cloud as quickly as possible. That's my biggest problem. And my response was, now let's see, if you get all of your legacy systems into the cloud, why don't you just have a legacy cloud? And they kind of laughed and thought, well, I guess that's not it. So you see, whatever you got, that's not it. Secondly, the principle that you're referring to in my book, I call the skip it principle. And the key is some of these problems you've got, you can skip altogether, completely skip them. For example, let me give you a quick example of skip it. A large hotel chain, they have many new hotels they built around the country, and it turned out everyone in every hotel was complaining about the elevator system because they were slow. And to put in new elevators or to make the elevators fast would cost way too much money. Forget it, impossible to fix, and everyone was complaining about the slow elevators. So what did we do? I skipped fixing the elevators. We just put nice full-length mirrors next to all of the floors where you get on the elevator.
You could stare at yourself.
Everybody started looking at themselves and checking their clothes and didn't realize it was slow, and everybody stopped complaining.
The TV's in there, yeah.
Wrong problem, yeah. See, so it skipped fixing the elevator.
Well, okay, so you're talking about the money situation and not spending. Does it come naturally for people to come up to you and ask you, since you're a Foresight guy, to predict the stock market? Yeah,
well, that is a perfect segue into change itself. And that is that there's economists use cyclical change to predict the future. And that's their training. And by the way, it served them quite well up until recently. And we all know economists haven't been doing that good lately. And that's because there's another kind of change. So let's stay with cyclical. The stock market is cyclical. You know when you're setting records, at some point, it's not going up forever. It's a cycle. It'll go down. By the way, it just went down recently, and you know what? Hey, it's going to go up again. Warren Buffett knows that. When everybody's buying, he's selling. When everybody's selling, he's buying. He uses it to his advantage. There are over 500 known cycles, business cycles, weather cycles. There's even sales cycles. By the way, if the sale, I like to have the sale completed before the sales cycle begins. You see, that way I can use it to my advantage. Now, here's the thing. There's another kind of change. And the economists don't have training in this, but it's now changing our world quickly on us. And that would be linear, meaning it's not a cycle. It's one way, / exponential, meaning it's growing like 2 before becomes 8, becomes 16, and so on. So once you get a smartphone, you're not going back to a dumb phone. That's not a cycle. Right. Once the people in India get refrigeration for their home, they're not going to say, I don't need refrigeration. And one more example, when the Chinese park their bicycle and get a car, they're not going to say, let's go back to the bike. These are one-way changes that have predictable problems as well as predictable opportunities. And it's amazing what you can see when you start making everything visible.
Well, in your book, you say going exponentially fast in the wrong direction can get you in trouble faster. So how do you know if you're going, the wrong way with change? Yes, exactly. Because there are some organizations and people say it's all about going exponentially fast. And again, that can lead you into really big trouble, as a lot of entrepreneurs have been finding out. So the key is hard trends and soft trends. That can help you determine direction. I mean, where is the future going? Well, when you see that there are not just 10s or 20s or hundreds, but there's thousands of absolute predictable hard trends, all of a sudden you've got opportunity. And let me
just share with our listeners, this isn't that difficult, actually. There are only 3 categories of hard trends. Can I just give them to them?
Sure.
Let me give you, just to make it a little more real so it doesn't sound so abstract.
Okay.
Not that hard. For example, one of the 3 categories of hard trends is demographics. For example, in this country, we got 78 million people. Hard trend. They're going to get older. They're not going to get younger. Mm-hmm. And we can predict a lot about the future. As a matter of fact, you can predict amazing opportunities. A quick example of an opportunity out of that. How about we create a smart watch for seniors, 80 years old and older? And you might say, well, they're not going to buy a smart watch. And I would say, you're right. You're going to buy it for them. And why are you going to buy it for them? Well, they all today, and the future ones, have a little chip in it called an accelerometer. It can sense motion. So if 90-year-old grandma, all of a sudden her watch rapidly moves 4 feet, what happened to grandma? Well, she fell. Does grandma need to know that? No, she's on the floor. You need to know it if it's your grandma. And grandpa, let's say, gets lost when he takes walks. He can't remember how to find his way home. What does grandpa do? He just asks his watch, how do I get home? And it'll tell him in a voice. Turn right, walk a block. I won't go into all of the health benefits and everything else and monitoring blood pressure and blood oxygen levels. You already get the idea.
Right.
That watch does not exist today. Now, let me just ask you, do you think a watch like that will exist, or do you think that's impossible?
No, I think it's possible, and I hope it has extra big letters so I can actually see it.
Yeah, well, see, the beauty, that's the beauty of voice, because now you could just ask it and have it tell you. So even better yet, what time is it? And it'll talk to you. Yeah. So the other thing that, so I said there were 3. Second one is technology. And of course, we are doing more. Actually, we're doing things today that was impossible just 2 years ago. And we'll be doing things 2 years from now that are impossible today. And I would say, well, how do you like to know what those things are? When you start using hard trends, you can start to see that. For example, simple example, let's take the iPhone 15. Whoa, we just got the 10.
Right.
Now, do we know anything about it? No guys left it in a bar. How would we know? These Apple guys. And I would say, well, will the iPhone 15 have a faster chip in it than the iPhone 14, 13, 12, 11, 10? And of course, yeah, with certainty it will. And can we fit more information into it, or is it full? No, we'll get more information into it. Matter of fact, let's talk about the cloud. Can we get more in the cloud, or is the cloud getting full? No, the cloud's not getting full. And after 3G wireless and 4G wireless and 5G wireless, is that it? No, it'll be followed by 6G wireless and 7G wireless. As a matter of fact, we even know when they'll come out and how powerful they'll be because of something I put in my book, The Anticipatory Organization, and that is how to know not just the what will happen, but how to use the 3 digital accelerators to even know the when it will happen. And that, again, gives you some amazing timelines. The last one, again, because I said there were 3, and this is a shocker for people, government regulation. When you get a new law put into place, there's amazing opportunities that come into play. Most of us, when we get a new regulation, we don't like it. We look at all the things we don't like. But one of the principles I teach in the book is opposites work better. In this case, start with what you do like. And a quick example, I'm in California, and there was a law that was passed, a real law for California, and that is within 3 years, kindergartners and first graders in the entire state of California, half their reading has to be nonfiction. Today, it's all fiction. And when you hear that, you say, well, why are they doing that? How stupid. Why don't they do something else? Don't they have something better to do? And you get all upset. But a 28-year-old teacher in San Diego did the opposite and made 3 phone calls, called the San Diego School District, San Francisco School District, the LA School District, 3 very big ones, and said, hey, you got this law, in 3 years, half of the books have to be nonfiction for those little kids. If I supplied the books, would you be interested? And they said, wow, yeah, of course we would. To make the long story short, they became a guaranteed customer, underwrote her business, and she didn't have to go on Shark Tank. The reason is she was using government regulations to see opportunity and took a move. So all of those, government regulation, demographics, technology, is amazingly predictable, giving you a whole world of opportunity.
Well, okay, so I'm fascinated by the changes in education because I have taught for so long, and all you hear about is how education, especially higher education, needs to be reinvented. What do you have people come to you asking you about what you think that it should be done with higher education or different industries like that? What kind of advice? What do you think needs to be done? What's the what and the when? And of course, there's government regulation there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I do work with a number of universities and so on, looking at the future of where it's going. And I think what we're first of all, we already know the answer to this. I'll just pose the question: are we preparing students at every level to thrive in a world that is ceasing to exist? And the answer is, well, kind of, yes. I mean, there are some eternal principles that were true in the past and will be true in the future. We better continue to teach those. But have we even figured out what those are? Be good to know. Secondly, what are the new principles that will help you to go forward and thrive in that future world? And now we've got AI coming in. And just to talk about that, because everyone thinks AI is going to do everything. There is something that because you're an educator, most don't, and there is the cognitive domain. And in education, we tend to teach to the lower levels of the cognitive domain, which is basically just information and regurgitating facts and so on. But when you get to the higher levels of the cognitive domain, analysis, problem solving, synthesis, that's where it gets exciting. And by the way, those are the very things that AI doesn't do that well. So in what we're going to see is that there is an art and a science to every profession. And typically in school, we learn the science and then we go out and learn the art on our own. We're going to see AI getting really good at the science, and humans are going to thrive with the art part. So we're going to be really spending a lot of time looking at how can we create a symbiotic relationship with AI. And because in symbiosis, you end up with two different animals that can't exist without each other. That's the future of AI and humans together. For example, Watson, IBM's supercomputer, it knows more about oncology than any oncologist right now. So if you know someone with cancer, heaven forbid, and I'm going to give you three choices. A really good oncologist, choice one. Choice two, just Watson, no human. And choice three, a really good oncologist that has access to Watson. That is symbiotic computing. So we are going to be working with AI rather than AI saying, we don't need you humans anymore, you're out of here.
A lot of the meetings I go to, the biggest complaint is that people have the hard skills, the stuff that you're saying the AI are going to do, and then but they don't have the soft skills. So do you think we're lacking in what we're teaching then in that respect?
Yes. Well, here's something I don't like to fix the blame. I like to fix the problem. And to say we need to change. For example, if you're a leader, whether it's to educators or anyone else, and you say, we need to change, you're basically saying you're doing something wrong. What we need to instead do with education, as well as everything else, is elevate what we do to increasing relevancy based on the direction the future is going, because there's no baggage around elevation. It's just like with a brand. I don't want you to change your brand. I want you to elevate your brand to increasing relevancy. So I think in this case, instead of saying, teachers, you're doing it all wrong, which makes them already not like you, I think instead, we've got to say, you know what, the world's changed. And we've got to look at what are the things that we're going to keep that are essential for us to be teaching 10, 15, 20 years from now. And if we don't teach these things, we're in trouble. But if you take everything, we'll fail. So let's see, what do we got to take and what do we got to leave behind? That separates the wheat from the chaff. And I think educators could get into that. And then secondly, what are the new things? And that's that art side that we want to teach. And one last little thought for you, because I think you'll find this interesting, and I'm getting a lot of people really liking this idea because of how quickly things are changing and making students of all ages, whether you're 80 or 8, adaptable. And that is, remember Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, some of us can remember they have all these badges. So I think that you're going to be learning something, and when you learn something, you get a badge. A number of badges leads to certification, and a number of certifications leads to a degree.
Right.
So I think what we're going to do is see badges, certifications, and degrees, and that since there are so many different kind of badges you could get, it allows you to find a way forward without having to wait 4 years or whatever degree you're working at.
Right.
And it also means even if you got a PhD, you need a few new badges and certifications. And I would say, yeah. And one last comment on this. Yeah, they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Hey, I got news for you. We're not dogs. So when you've got someone that is older and they're open-minded enough to work with some young people and learn a few new tricks, look out. You got now wisdom combined with new knowledge. You got something really powerful there.
I agree. You know, I've been talking about how I think that things will become more a la carte and gamification and that type of thing to try and get people more interested in different aspects of it. But then I'm wondering, you know, if we let people pick and choose, how much of the humanities part are we going to lose? Isn't that kind of the glue in a bit? You know what I mean? Are we going to lose
Absolutely. No. I didn't say allow people to pick and choose necessarily.
Okay.
I think once you get out of formal school, I think picking and choosing plays a fairly good role. But I think in school, that's where you need a really good foundation. Otherwise, you won't be creative, you won't be curious, and you won't have a wide enough palette to be, from a knowledge standpoint, to be able to, go in different directions and see solutions. You'll be too narrow. Because I think the more focused and narrow you are, the less you're going to come up with innovative new solutions to not just big problems, but even everyday problems. So I like creating a good foundation down at, in that lower level. And frankly, I think there's plenty of room to grow that foundation.
Yeah, I definitely think younger generations are going to value different things than the boomers did in terms of, right now, the 4-year degree is still what, older executives and value, but it'll be interesting to see what younger people value for education. And I definitely think it's going to change. And I think that your book title is so interesting to me because it's the anticipatory organization. What I see a lot in online education, for example, is a lot of these schools aren't anticipating. They're only looking back at what they did and what worked in the past. This is how we got students in the past, but then supply and demand changed completely because regular universities got in and that sent, for-profits in a different direction. Do you think that, what are you doing to help organizations be more anticipatory?
Yes, well, thank you. And really, the reason I titled that book, The Anticipatory Organization, instead of The Anticipatory Individual, is because we all tend to work with other people in organizations of some kind. And if you're the only one that's anticipatory and everyone else is agile and reactionary, you're going to find yourself an unhappy camper. So it's kind of like, how can we as an individual, which I do teach in the book, but also help the people around us to not just react quickly. You see, most people think it's all about being agile. And agile is reacting quickly after a problem occurs. It's reacting quickly after a disruption occurs. And what I'm saying is there's two sides to a coin. You can't predict everything. I want you to be agile. But what you need is a new competency, which I'm teaching in this book. And that is the other side of the coin, how to anticipate problems before you have them so you can pre-solve them and not have them in the first place. How to anticipate disruptions before they disrupt, turn disruption into a choice. And I think rather than just react after the fact, since technological change is increasing at an exponential rate, we need to get on the other side of that and start predicting, again, the problems as well as the opportunities and seeing what's out there and acting before the fact. And we end up with some excellent results. So I've been teaching, again, this methodology. It's a way of thinking. Change how you think, you change your results. By becoming anticipatory, you can, the companies and organizations that are embracing this are doing amazing things in a short amount of time because they've freed themselves of what I call rear view mirror thinking. There's a reason your rear view mirror is so small and your windshield is so big. And usually when we're thinking about the future, we're using a rear view mirror mindset. We're thinking of it's our past perspective that's drawing us forward, instead of, no, let's look at what's really coming up ahead so we can see all the amazing opportunities that lie before us. And, there's one thing I did want to get in, because I know we might be running short of time.
No,
And I do want to bring something in, because I know we're talking about success in this, in your radio show. And I just wanted to share a couple of quick things. And that is, I was speaking at I was a commencement speaker this last spring, and I'm sure I shocked the parents when I said, I don't want all the graduates, I don't want you to focus on being successful, because success is all about you. It's inwardly focused. And instead, I'd like you to focus on being significant. I'd like you to live a life of significance rather than success, because significance is about others. It's not about you. It's what you're doing for others. And if you live a life of significance, you'll be successful by default. So, it's kind of like being careful of what you're looking for. You might get it. And I think so think of significance. And then one last thing I shared with them, I want to share with your listeners, and that is, think big about your future, and then realize you just thought small, because there's always a bigger big. Never do the big, always do the bigger big. And I think, so that means think through your very best ideas. Here's where I'm going. Here's what I'm doing. And then after you've got that worked out and it looks really good, then I'd like you to step back and say, now, how can I render that obsolete with something far better? Do that instead. Just think back to yourself. When you were, let's say, 20, and you were thinking big about your future. Now, in hindsight, were you really thinking small?
Well,
and the answer is, well, of course, we all were. Well, yeah. Well, so here's what I'm saying right now. You're thinking small right now. We still are doing it. So don't do the big. Always do the bigger big, and try to live a significant life rather than just a successful life.
Well, that's such great advice. I went out recently with Naveen Jain, who's the billionaire behind, Moon Express and Viome and all the companies that he's created. And he was part of this big meeting I went to. And the theme of the meeting was Moonshot. What is your moonshot? And that's basically what you're saying. What would you do? What if you could, take away the limitations that you think you have and think bigger? And I think people are afraid to think bigger sometimes, don't you think?
Yes, and I think that's because of the risk. It's kind of like innovation. There's everyday innovation, which is something that's not taught, that I teach in the book, which is inventive solutions to everyday problems. You can empower everybody with that. But then there's also exponential innovation, where you take a giant leap ahead, and most people will not do that. That's your moonshot concept. And the reason is, well, there's high risk. But here's the beauty. When you lay out the future facts, the hard trends, and you can see what's up ahead for sure with certainty, you can do exponential innovation with low risk, because if you don't do it, someone else will. It's going to happen anyway. Right. And all of a sudden, you can innovate with low risk. And that's what gives people the confidence to make bold moves rather than hunker down and stick with the smaller ideas.
Well, don't you have to have some creativity? I mean, you can't predict everything, right? So I'm sure you've had some surprises.
Yeah, you can't predict everything. That's why you need agility. There's two sides to the coin. But what I'm saying is, you'll be shocked at how much you can predict. And what a powerful tool that is. Because again, uncertainty doesn't give you the confidence to move forward.
Right.
Certainty gives you the window to move forward and to make a bold move. That's why this whole thing of hard trends is so powerful. And once again, I like the soft trends. I don't like them. I can change them. Matter of fact, I'm working with a major drug company in an ongoing way, doing that very thing, becoming a positive disruptor. Because you see, disruption is thought of as negative. Why? Because it happened to you and you didn't see it coming.
Right.
But the reality is, don't tell that to Amazon, or to Airbnb, or to the others that have been doing the disruptor is doing what? Well, it's all positive to them. So what I would say is, I want us to create positive disruptions, to create a better future for ourselves, and do that for yourself, for your family, and others. You see, hope is not a strategy, and just hunkering down and saying, let's see what's going to happen, isn't going to move you forward. It's when you decide, you know what, I'm going to make it happen. I've seen what I think the ideal future is for myself, for my organization, or the people that I serve. What is the ideal? And then are there some new tools to help us do that now? And you'll find, and some hard trends that allow me to leverage that. All of a sudden, bingo, you can start seeing why the subtitle of my book is so good, I think, and nails it. And that is how to turn disruption and change into opportunity and advantage.
Well, yeah, it is a great subtitle, and it makes me think of what you said in a talk. You were talking a minute ago, like the Airbnbs, the Uber, and all that. Why you said why a cab driver didn't invent Uber? Why do you think? I mean, was there any surprise to you of these companies, of who came up with them as compared to who maybe logically would have come up with them?
Well, actually, not really, and that is because. In the question that I asked in the video that you're referring to, I think that's a YouTube one I've got out there, but I was giving a speech and I said, why didn't a cab driver think of Uber? Why didn't Hilton or Marriott think of Airbnb? Right. And the reason is they were all too busy doing what they've always done. And today you can busy yourself right out of business. It's important to step back and look at the new big picture. Look at those hard trends that are shaping the future and what is now possible, and then realize if you don't do it, someone else will. That's the idea of seeing disruption before it disrupts. Let me just go back to when I launched a book back in 1993 called Techno Trends. I'm happy to say another bestseller. And in that book, I was speaking at the American Booksellers annual convention, 10,000 booksellers in the audience. This is 2 years before Amazon was founded. And you can get the old audio tape of that speech because they taped it. And I clearly said, in 2 years, we're going to have a virtual bookstore. And if you listen to it, I basically am describing Amazon. And I said, any of you could do this right now, but I don't think you are. I don't think you will. I think you're too busy doing what you do. I think it'll take someone from the outside. And by the way, the reason I was able to make that prediction is because the tools to do it were there. And one of the principles I teach is, if it can be done, it will be done. If you don't do it, someone else will. So using the methodologies I'm teaching, you can see what will be done. And then you've got some choice.
Oh, so why aren't you Bezos? Why did you not do it yourself? Have you ever thought of doing some of those things? Or you?
Well, I have. I started 6 companies. 5 were profitable in the first year. I've done really well. But, at my core, the reason is, and I think you can relate to this knowing your background, and that is the 2 most important moments in a person's life is the day you're born and the day you find out why you're born. And I knew long ago why I was put on the planet, and that is I was put on the planet to teach. And I remember decades ago when I was, the companies were growing quickly, and I was about to open up a West Coast manufacturing place for my airplane design and so on. And I thought, if I'm 95 years old and I look back at my life and this is how it unfolded from a professional standpoint, am I happy? And the answer was no. So I knew that wasn't the answer for me. I think there's more than one right answer. So what I've found is in giving almost 3,000 keynote speeches all over the world and then writing the books and, the thousands of articles is helping others to unlock the potential within themselves and to create a better future for not just themselves, but for everyone else. And to me, that's a worthy thing. So it isn't just, I've financially done extremely well, but it is money. Money is about success. And I'm living what I told you. I'd rather live a life of significance and empower people with a God-given gift, and that is teaching. I was just given this gift, and I think if you're given a gift, you should use it.
Well, have you ever looked at some of these thoughts of, maybe you didn't want to be Bezos and have Amazon, you wanted to do this direction, but have you ever looked at something and thought, this is going to be the next big thing, and it didn't come true? Have you had any predictions or anything surprise you?
The truth is not really.
That's
It's
pretty
all
good.
it's all really very. I mean, if you go back through my time, and again with all of that I've written and all that, it's been thousands of predictions, and they've been amazingly accurate. And the key is I leave out the parts I can be wrong about. So instead of looking at the soft trends, the ifs and maybes, I stick with the hard trends, and it's pretty easy to be able to see, make that invisible visible. And I think it was 5 or 6 years ago when we were just starting to hear about drones getting big. One of the things that I did was I talked about, well, let's look at what is the ideal use of drones, and you'll start to see more where drones are going. And one of the predictions I said is, well, we're going to see them used for lifeguards. Because if somebody's drowning out there, wouldn't that be a good use of a drone to fly the drone out there with a microphone on the drone to say, here, grab this life preserver, we'll be out in a minute.
Right.
And of course, if you were paying attention to the news, that was just done recently in Australia, and you'll see it done by beaches all around. Now, I put that out there 5 years ago. Well, all I'm doing is letting people know what is possible, giving them applications for it. And you know what? All of a sudden it starts happening. So I've seen that happen for decades. So I'm actually helping to give people thoughts and ideas about how to use these things in a positive way. And it's good. And just again, going back to when I was writing my last book, Flash Foresight, I started writing it in the recession. And of course, the real estate was a big part of that. And I thought, as I'm writing the book, why don't I start a company with no money and no employees and use the principles of the book and see how good the book is. And what I did was I used the principles, hard trend, soft trend. That's one of the principles. And I could see mobile apps was going to not be a soft trend and disappear, but would be continuing to grow. By the way, back in 2010, when I started writing that book in 9 and 10, mobile apps were like not business. They were more games. How do you make your phone look like a beer when you pour it next to your face and all that, 99 cents. And I thought, there's going to be mobile apps for purchasing, logistics, supply chain, remote disease monitoring, finding your lost dog. So and by the way, if I don't make them, someone else will. So I generated a list and then I used a free tool, Google search, to see what out of all those things, which thing already had that the biggest number of people looking for it, and the answer was foreclosures. So what I did was I just created the first national real estate apps, and I did that by, again, I used my own principle, the skip it principle. I didn't want to hire somebody, so I called the local university, asked for the computer division, talked to the dean, and said I would like the name of an undergraduate getting a degree in software programming that's smarter than all the teachers. And they said, oh, you mean Steve? And I said, yeah, Steve. So, because there's always a Steve or a Sue or
There's
a Betty.
always a Steve.
And so I talked to Steve and I said, what are you doing on the side to make money? And he said, I'm programming websites. And I said, I bet you're bored. He said, yeah, I've been doing it since junior high. And I said, how'd you like to make a mobile app that no one's ever seen before? And he said, cool. And I said, I can't pay any money, but I can give you a percent of the profit, for the first several years after. He said, I'm in. So, I was able to do it without having to learn how to program, without hiring somebody. Anyway, I used the skip it principle and the principles I teach. It took 6 months to launch. I actually put out 3 apps. One was called Complete Foreclosures, another one Complete Homes, another one Complete Rentals. They were the 17th most downloaded app in the first week. I was in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, because I was disrupting real estate. By the second week, I was on national TV. I made all of the apps free so that I could make more money. And by the way, that I was the first guy to come up with a way to do to get recurring revenue in an app. So I made the apps free. And what I did is I charged real estate agents $24.95 a month to have an exclusive zip code in the app. And what that did was, when all the zip codes were gone, that was 1.7 million a month in recurring revenue. And now I started getting busy, and you could start to see me on a path of being a Bezos kind of guy. But that isn't. But then I would have been busy doing that, and you would have never read the book that I just wrote.
Right.
Matter of fact, you wouldn't have read the last book. You wouldn't have read a lot of stuff. I wouldn't have given all those speeches. I would have been too busy growing a real estate empire. And that's not why I was
not
put
you.
on the planet.
Yeah.
So what I did was I licensed that off to a little company called Zillow, and I just go back to doing what I do. So I'm just, you see, it's really about what is your future, and everyone has to shape that and decide what success is and what that means to them on their own, right?
Well,
it's not the same definition for everyone.
Well, you definitely have a beautiful mind for thinking this stuff and seeing things that other people don't. I'm curious, do you have any predictions for the next couple years that you could get people who aren't as good at seeing these things as clearly as you are to get them working on disrupting?
Yeah, I'll give you that and an action they should take.
Okay.
First of all, over the next 4 or 5 years, we will not just change, we will truly transform, which is very different than change.
Mm-hmm.
We'll transform every business process, how we sell, how we market, how we communicate, how we collaborate, how we innovate, how we train, how we educate. We're transforming the whole shoot and match.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the hard trend. The tools to do that exist today. It is going to happen. That's the hard trend. The soft trend, will you transform your business processes? Well, that's soft. That's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a maybe. That's the maybe part. But the
Right.
tools to do it, and the fact that it's going to happen, and eventually, if you don't, you're in trouble. Oh, well, that's all hard.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a mountain, a solid mountain of amazing opportunity for all of us, right in front of us. And it's a steep mountain, and it's amazing. It's exponential in its curve. It's fogged in, and the reason you can't see it is the fog. And the fog, by the way, is the news. Because bad news sells, good news doesn't sell. And if there's no bad news, they give you the anniversary of bad news. So what I'd like all of our listeners to do is to blow away the fog.
Mm-hmm.
And here's an action for you all. Spend 1 hour a week unplugging from the present and plugging into your future. That is where you're going to spend the rest of your life. And then in that hour, instead of looking at all the things you're uncertain about, why don't you start looking at the hard trends and the things you can be certain about? And then tie each one to an opportunity for you. Pick one and do it. And you'll see yourself shaping the future. And to help all of your listeners to do just that, I'm going to do something real special for all of them right now. I'm going to give you a hardcover copy of my book for free. You will have to pay a few bucks for shipping, but I'm going to give it to you. And I'm going to do that because I know you're going to love it so much. You're going to recommend it to a friend, and I'll end up doing fine. So you can get that book by going to, the name of the book is The Anticipatory Organization. I'm going to make it easier. Go to theaobook.com. So THEAOBOOK.com. And you can, again, you got to pay a little bit for shipping, but you'll end up getting a free hardcover copy. And read that book and then spend an hour a week doing what I just said, and you'll find yourself being an amazing futurist. Because I'm a teacher, I'm not a teller. I'm actually trying to show you how to do it.
That's awesome. What a nice offer. And this has been so interesting, Daniel. I loved our conversation. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.